Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for a deep dive into something that might just change your life?
Ooh, setting the bar high right out of the gate.
Well, today we're tackling Jeff Keller's attitude is everything. And, on the surface, it sounds like, your typical self-help fare. But Keller's story is what hooked me.
Yeah, he didn't start out as some, guru on a mountaintop. This guy was a lawyer, brand out, stressed to the max, even had physical symptoms from it. Pretty relatable for a lot of folks, I'd say.
Oh, absolutely. And what's even wilder is how he stumbled onto this whole attitude thing. Not at some fancy seminar, but through a late-night infomercial. Remember those?
For the mental bank, no less, endorsed by Florence Henderson. I mean, the Brady Bunch, you can't make this stuff up.
Right. I totally geeked out about that too. But the point is, it wasn't the infomercial itself, it was what it sparked in Keller. He went from feeling like his life was a D to creating an A-plus life, and he credits it all to a change in attitude. So what does that tell us? Maybe there's something to this whole mindset thing after all.
Right. It makes you wonder how much of what we experience is determined by things we can't control versus how we choose to perceive those things.
And that's where Keller's analogy of attitude as a window comes in. Think about it. A clean, sparkling window, light just pours in, right? Everything looks bright, full of possibilities. But then you've got that grimy, dirty window. Same world outside, but your view is totally distorted.
And we all start out with that clean window as kids, all that natural curiosity and optimism. But then life happens, setbacks, disappointments, that inner critic starts piping up.
It's like our window gets all smudged up. But here's the good news, and this is where Keller gets really empowering. He says we have the power to clean that window.
It's not about pretending everything is perfect or ignoring problems. It's more about choosing a different lens, seeing things more clearly.
Maybe even finding the opportunity hidden within a challenge. Like that story Keller tells about two people who have the exact same experience at a coffee shop. One is totally annoyed, complaining about everything.
And the other one sees it as a chance to network, maybe make a valuable connection. Same event, two completely different realities created by their attitudes.
Okay, so that's the what, but how do we actually do that? How do we shift our lens, clean the window, however you want to picture it? That's where this whole we become what we think about concept comes in.
It's based on Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret. Keller even throws in quotes from Napoleon Hill in the Bible to back it up.
Basically, we're like human magnets attracting what we focus on.
And I think a lot of people hear that and they think, oh, that's just wishful thinking. But it's actually more practical than that. Our thoughts drive our actions, right?
It's like Keller's example with Fred, who wants to earn more money. Just thinking about it isn't going to magically make it happen. But what if Fred starts to believe that he can earn more?
Suddenly, he might start noticing opportunities he hadn't seen before, or he'll have the confidence to ask for that raise. Action follows belief.
So true. And Keller lays out some pretty practical steps for how to actually shift those beliefs. Reading inspiring books, even for like 15 minutes a day, listening to motivational stuff.
Yeah.
And really paying attention to your self-talk. What are you telling yourself all day long? Is it helping or hurting you?
It's not magic. It's about putting in the work, but with the right mindset.
And speaking of building a foundation, that's where visualization comes in.
Ah, yes. Creating your own mental movies, as Keller calls it.
It sounds a little out there, but the stories he shares are pretty compelling.
Like Jim Carrey writing himself that $10 million check back in 1987, years before he actually earned it. And guess what? He eventually did. It makes you wonder, what if we all took a page from Carrey's book?
Started visualizing our own success. It's like we're all writing these scripts in our heads about what we think is possible for ourselves, but most of us aren't doing it consciously.
And those scripts often become self-fulfilling prophecies. Remember Robert Jones, the guy running for judge who was always writing Judge Robert Jones everywhere?
He visualized himself in that role, and he actually won. It's a little creepy, but also kind of amazing.
What's fascinating is this works both ways, for positive and negative outcomes.
Okay, now that is creepy.
Think about those bumper stickers that say, my kid's an honor student, or I brake for tailgaters. Are they actually programming themselves for those very things to happen?
I never thought about it like that. Now I'm going to be looking at bumper stickers in a whole new light. Okay, so we're shaping our reality with our thoughts. But thinking alone isn't enough. We need action, right? Which brings us to commitment.
And Keller's clear about this. Commitment isn't just trying hard. It's an unwavering decision to achieve something no matter what obstacles get thrown your way.
You're showing up consistently, even when it's hard, even when you can't see the whole path ahead.
And here's the thing. Commitment can unlock opportunities you never even saw coming. It's like the universe conspires to help those who are truly committed.
Like Keller's own story, his commitment to sharing his message led to this chance meeting with Stuart Kamen.
And that connection led to the creation of his successful newsletter. Talk about a domino effect.
It's about aligning your actions with a deep belief in what you're doing. And sometimes that means sacrifice.
Take author David Baldacci. He was a lawyer, but he loved writing. For years, he honed his craft, writing from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., even with a demanding job and a family.
Wow, talk about dedication.
And then there's Jerry, the art gallery owner. He got a call about a potential deal with Disney, but there was a catch. They needed a location in either Minnesota or Massachusetts, and Jerry's gallery was in New York.
So what did he do? Overthink it? Analyze it to death?
Nope. Hopped on a plane to Boston the next day, secured a lease before even knowing if he had the Disney deal, and guess what? He got it.
See, sometimes taking that leap of faith, that unwavering commitment, it can actually create its own luck. But, the story that really blew me away was Benjamin Roll. This guy started law school at 67. It took him 14 tries over 6 years to pass the California bar exam. He didn't give up until he achieved his goal at the age of 74.
Talk about commitment and the power of having a long-term vision.
It's like age became irrelevant. He was determined to make it happen. So whatever your goal is, whether it's launching a business, writing a book, or even just learning a new skill, commitment is about that unwavering decision to see it through.
Absolutely. But we also have to acknowledge that even with the best intentions and all the commitment in the world, things don't always go smoothly. We're going to encounter problems, setbacks, even what feel like failures.
And that's where Keller's idea of reframing those challenges comes in.
It's about shifting your perspective, right? Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You ask, what can I learn from this? What's the opportunity here?
And it's not about pretending everything's rosy. It's about looking for that potential for growth and learning.
Like that incredible story from the New York Times where a woman wrote an essay about finding unexpected benefits from having a brain tumor.
Yeah. Talk about turning a negative into a positive.
She talked about finding strength in the outpouring of support from her community, developing a deeper appreciation for life, and strengthening her relationships with her siblings.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the midst of adversity, there's always something to be gained.
And then you have Dave Bruno, who lost his job, was in a near-fatal car accident, faced bankruptcy and homelessness. Talk about a rough patch.
But he used those experiences as fuel to pursue his dream of launching a motivational card company, an idea he got from a TV commercial he saw while recovering in the hospital, by the way. And get this, 5 years after that accident, he'd launched his company and sold over 2 million cards.
It shows you the power of attitude in shaping how we respond to setbacks.
And, even Keller's own career transition came from a place of problem. He wasn't happy as a lawyer, but it was that dissatisfaction that pushed him to find a more fulfilling path.
Sometimes those negative experiences are the catalyst for something much better.
So next time you hit a roadblock, take a moment to pause and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What's the opportunity here? You might be surprised by what you discover.
Absolutely. And as you start to reframe your perspective on those challenges, you might also notice a shift in your language, in the words you use to describe your experiences. And that's something Keller spends a lot of time talking about. The power of our words.
It's so easy to dismiss that, sticks and stones and all that, but the examples he gives are pretty eye-opening.
Like his story about being unable to fix anything around the house, which he blames on years of telling himself, I can't fix anything.
Yeah, it's funny, but also kind of sad. He literally talked himself into incompetence.
The point is, our words aren't just neutral. They actually have the power to program our minds. If you keep saying, I'm bad with money or I'm terrible at relationships, you might be unknowingly setting yourself up for failure.
It's like those thoughts become self-fulfilling prophecies.
So become more aware of your language patterns. What are the words you use habitually, especially when you're talking about yourself, your career, your health? Do they reflect a positive outlook, or are you constantly reinforcing negativity?
Even something as simple as how you answer the question, how are you, can be revealing.
You've got the don't asks, the thank God it's Fridays, the I'm okays.
And then you've got the people who light up the room with a terrific or fantastic. It's like their energy is completely different.
The negative responses can signal dissatisfaction, a sense of being overwhelmed. The mediocre ones, a lack of enthusiasm, maybe even resignation.
But those positive responses, they're contagious. They suggest optimism, a belief in good things to come.
Keller suggests we make a conscious effort to use those more positive, high-energy responses, even if we don't completely feel it in the moment.
Like you're choosing to focus on the positive, even when it's hard. And sometimes that shift in language can actually shift your feelings.
It's about retraining your brain to look for the good, to appreciate what you have, to believe in your ability to create a better reality.
And sometimes that means acknowledging when things aren't working and choosing a different approach. Which brings us to something we all struggle with: complaining.
Keller doesn't say we should never vent, but he cautions against making it a habit.
Because it does more than just annoy other people, right?
Right.
It keeps us stuck in a loop of negativity.
It reinforces that negative mindset, prevents us from taking constructive action. You're replaying the problem over and over without actually doing anything to solve it.
And nobody wants to be that person everyone avoids because they know they're going to get an earful of complaints.
Exactly. It's not about pretending everything is perfect, but about finding healthier ways to express our frustrations and then focusing on solutions, not just dwelling on the problems.
Remember the story of Pedro, who lost contact with his family in Honduras after that hurricane? I mean, talk about a situation where complaining would be understandable.
But he chose to focus his energy on helping others, and he remained optimistic even in the face of such a difficult situation.
It's a powerful reminder to keep things in perspective. Are your problems truly life or death matters? Often, complaining comes from a lack of perspective. We magnify those challenges, making them seem bigger than they really are.
And when you focus on solutions, you often realize that things aren't as bad as they initially seemed.
So what can we do? Next time you feel the urge to complain, ask yourself, what's one thing I can do to make this situation better?
It's about shifting your energy from complaining to problem solving. Even if it's just a small step, taking action can make a huge difference in how you feel.
And you know what? Speaking of taking action, we can't underestimate the power of who we choose to spend our time with.
This is where Keller's distinction between toxic people and nourishing people comes in.
Right. Toxic people are like energy vampires. They suck the life out of you with negativity, criticism, drama. Nourishing people, on the other hand, they lift you up, they inspire you.
Think about Mike, the guy who transformed his life by choosing to spend time with positive, goal-oriented people in college. He left behind those negative influences from high school, and it made all the difference.
It's a great example of the power of association. We really do become like the people we surround ourselves with.
It's like we absorb their attitudes and behaviors by osmosis.
Plus, you want to take a good look at your own social circle, right? Are your friends helping you grow or holding you back?
It's not about ditching anyone who's going through a rough patch, but about making conscious choices about who you allow to influence your thoughts and beliefs.
It reminds me of Keller's friend, Mark LeBlanc. This guy is always going above and beyond to help others, and as a result, he's got this amazing network of people who are always willing to support him.
It's a beautiful illustration of the principle of reciprocity. When we give generously, we often receive in abundance.
And it's not just about who we spend time with in person, right? It's also about the books we read, the podcasts we listen to, the social media we consume.
Absolutely. It's about choosing to feed our minds a steady diet of positivity, surrounding ourselves with messages and images that uplift and inspire us.
Creating that positive echo chamber for our thoughts and beliefs. And that, I think, leads us perfectly into the importance of confronting our fears.
Oh, yes, because fear can be a major roadblock to creating the life we want.
Keller's really candid about his own struggles with fear, you know? He tells this story about being terrified to ask anyone out on a date in high school.
I remember that. So relatable, right? It's amazing how much fear can keep us from going after what we truly want.
We invent all these excuses for staying in our comfort zones.
Those comfort zones can also become cages.
And Keller argues that stepping outside those comfort zones, even if it's just in small ways, is essential for growth.
It's about challenging those limiting beliefs that keep us playing small and stepping into a more expansive version of ourselves.
It's not about being fearless. It's about having the courage to act even when you are afraid.
Because the act of stepping outside that comfort zone, regardless of the outcome, is a victory in itself.
It builds confidence. It shows us that we're capable of more than we thought we were. And Often, it leads to unexpected opportunities.
Right. Opportunities that wouldn't have existed if we'd stayed huddled in our fear.
It makes me think about how much we emphasize avoiding failure, especially in school and at work.
But Keller flips that script. He challenges us to see failure not as the opposite of success, but as a necessary stepping stone on the path to growth.
Think about how many times we fell down as kids learning to walk or ride a bike. We didn't see those as reasons to give up. We saw them as part of the learning process.
And somewhere along the way, we lose that. We start fearing failure instead of embracing it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
And Keller urges us to reclaim that childlike spirit of resilience. He reminds us that even the most successful people in the world have faced their share of setbacks and failures.
Like those professional baseball players who were considered successful even with a 70% failure rate.
It's a great analogy, right? It shows that failure is simply part of the game. It's about focusing on the long game, on learning from each experience, and on continually refining your approach.
And if you're hitting roadblocks over and over, maybe it's time to ask yourself some tough questions.
Are my expectations realistic? Am I truly committed? Am I surrounding myself with supportive people? Am I properly prepared? And maybe most importantly, am I truly willing to fail?
Because sometimes failure is an indication that you need to adjust your approach, your timeline, or even your goals. It's about being honest with yourself and making choices that align with your values and what you truly want to create.
It reminds me of Sally Jesse Raphael, who, before she became a household name, went through years of financial struggles, firings, even homelessness.
But she persevered, and eventually she achieved massive success. It's a testament to the power of resilience.
And then there's Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, who got 33 rejections from publishers before finding a home for Chicken Soup for the Soul.
And that book went on to sell over 30 million copies. Imagine if they'd given up after 10 rejections or 20. It's a testament to the power of persistence.
And belief. Believing in your vision even when others don't.
Absolutely. Because sometimes those rejections are just redirecting you towards a better path.
And speaking of connecting with others, Keller also emphasizes the importance of building strong relationships and networks. He defines networking as the development of relationships with people for mutual benefit.
And he makes the point that we can't achieve truly great things in isolation. We need to connect with others, support each other, collaborate.
And he shares his own story of how networking led to a whole cascade of positive outcomes for his business, including meeting the person who introduced him to his book publisher.
It's a great example of how networking is about more than just collecting business cards or trying to sell yourself. It's about building genuine relationships, offering support, being willing to help others.
He gives a ton of great tips for making networking more effective. He talks about being an active participant in groups and organizations, contributing to your network, and being a good listener.
He also emphasizes the importance of serving others.
Instead of focusing on what you can get, focus on how you can help the people in your network. Like his friend Mark LeBlanc. Mark is always going above and beyond to help others.
And as a result, he's built this incredible network of people who are always willing to support him in return.
It's the principle of reciprocity in action.
Exactly. When we give generously, we often receive in abundance.
And Keller also stresses the simple things. Be a good listener, call people just to check in, take advantage of opportunities to meet new people, and don't forget those thank you notes.
A small gesture of gratitude can go a long way in strengthening those connections.
It's all about approaching networking with a spirit of generosity and a genuine desire to connect with others. Recognizing that our success is often intertwined with the success of others.
So, as we move into the next part of our deep dive, let's keep all of these insights in mind.
We've covered a lot of ground already, and there's so much more to explore in Keller's book.
It's funny how we say things like, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." But Keller really challenges that notion, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's like he's saying our words have a deeper impact than we realize. They're not just sounds, they're actually shaping our beliefs and, ultimately, our reality.
Like that story about the guy who was convinced he couldn't fix anything around the house because he'd been telling himself that for years. He'd practically programmed himself for incompetence.
I know, right? It's almost comical, but it makes you wonder how many of us are doing the same thing in other areas of our lives.
We might be unknowingly sabotaging ourselves with negative self-talk. So how do we break free from those limiting scripts?
Well, Keller suggests we start by simply paying attention to the words we use, especially when we're talking about ourselves. What are the phrases that come up most often? Do they reflect a positive outlook or a negative one?
It can be really revealing to look at your language patterns. Even something as simple as how you respond to, "How are you?" can tell you a lot about your underlying mindset.
It's true. Think about it. You've got the people who respond with a groan and a don't ask or a tired, thank God it's Friday.
And then you have the people who light up the room with a terrific or fantastic. The difference in energy is palpable.
It really is. It's like you can almost feel the negativity radiating off some people, while others seem to be surrounded by this aura of positivity.
And it's not just about appearances, it's about what those responses reveal about their internal state. The negative responses often signal a sense of being overwhelmed, of feeling stuck.
The I'm okays and could be worses, they kind of suggest resignation, like they've given up on expecting anything better. But those positive responses, there's a sense of hope there, a belief that good things are possible.
And Keller suggests that even if you're not feeling particularly terrific in the moment, making an effort to respond with that positive energy can actually shift your mood.
Yeah, it's like you're tricking your brain into feeling better. Fake it till you make it, right?
Well, it's more than just faking it. It's about consciously choosing to focus on the positive, even when it feels difficult. And over time, as you develop this habit of positive self-talk, it can actually start to change those underlying beliefs that are driving your language.
So it's not just about putting on a happy face for the world. It's about actually shifting your internal dialogue. But let's be real, there are times when things are tough, when we need to vent, right?
Yeah.
Keller doesn't suggest we bottle up our emotions or pretend everything is perfect.
He acknowledges that venting can be a healthy release sometimes, but he cautions against making it a habit.
Because it's not just annoying to the people around you, right?
Mm.
It actually keeps us stuck in that loop of negativity. It reinforces those negative thought patterns we're trying to break free from.
It's like replaying a broken record. You're dwelling on the problem without actually doing anything to solve it.
And honestly, nobody wants to be the person everyone avoids because they know they're just going to get bombarded with complaints.
Exactly. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about finding healthier ways to process those difficult emotions and then focusing on solutions.
Remember Pedro, who we talked about earlier, the guy who lost contact with his family after that devastating hurricane. I mean, talk about a situation where complaining would be completely understandable.
Absolutely. But he chose to focus his energy on helping others and maintaining a positive outlook, even in the face of such a challenging situation.
It's a powerful reminder that we always have a choice in how we respond, even when things are really tough.
Pedro's story also highlights how empowering it can be to shift your focus from the problem to the solution. Instead of dwelling on what's wrong, ask yourself, what's one thing I can do to make this situation a little better?
It's about taking action, even if it's just a small step. And I've found that once you start taking action, things often don't seem as overwhelming as they did when you were just stewing in those negative emotions.
And speaking of taking action, let's talk about the importance of who we choose to spend our time with.
Right. The company we keep can have a huge impact on our attitude and our overall well-being.
This is where Keller's distinction between toxic people and nourishing people is so helpful. Toxic people are like those energy vampires we talked about earlier. They drain you with their negativity, criticism, drama.
You leave an interaction with them feeling depleted, discouraged.
Exactly. Whereas nourishing people, they lift you up, they inspire you, they make you feel like you can take on the world. Think about Mike, the guy who decided to surround himself with positive, goal-oriented people when he got to college. He left behind those negative influences from high school, and it completely changed the trajectory of his life.
It's a great example of the power of association. We really do become like the people we spend time with.
It's like we absorb their attitudes and behaviors by osmosis.
Makes you really want to evaluate your own social circle, right? Are your friends helping you grow or holding you back?
It's not about ditching anyone who's going through a rough patch, but about making conscious choices about who you allow to influence your thoughts and beliefs. And it's not just about in-person interactions. It's also about the books we read, the podcasts we listen to, even the social media we consume.
It's like we're curating our own mental diet. We can choose to feed our minds with negativity and drama, or we can choose to focus on content that uplifts, inspires, and expands our thinking.
Exactly. It's about being intentional about the messages we allow into our minds. And that leads us to another important piece of the puzzle: confronting our fears.
Oh yeah, because fear can be a major roadblock to creating the life we want, can't it?
Keller gets really honest about his own struggles with fear in the book. Remember that story he tells about being too scared to ask anyone out on a date in high school?
So relatable. It's amazing how much fear can keep us stuck.
We tell ourselves all sorts of stories to justify staying in our comfort zones.
But those comfort zones can also become cages, keeping us from pursuing our dreams and really experiencing life to the fullest.
And Keller's point is that stepping outside of those comfort zones, even in small ways, is essential for growth.
It's about having the courage to act even when we are afraid. And you know what? Sometimes just the act of taking that step, regardless of the outcome, is a victory in itself.
It is, because it shows us that we're capable of more than we thought. It builds confidence. And often it leads to opportunities and experiences we could never have imagined if we'd stayed huddled in our fear.
It makes me think about how much we emphasize avoiding failure, especially in school and at work. It's like failure has become this big, scary monster that we're all terrified of.
But Keller challenges that perspective. He says, what if we viewed failure not as the opposite of success, but as an essential stepping stone on the path to growth?
Like when we were kids learning to walk or ride a bike. We fell down countless times, but we didn't give up. We saw those falls as part of the process.
And somewhere along the way, we lose that. We become so afraid of making mistakes that we stop taking risks, we stop trying new things.
And Keller urges us to reclaim that childlike sense of resilience. He reminds us that even the most successful people in the world have experienced their share of setbacks and failures along the way.
Like those professional baseball players who are considered successful even with a 70% failure rate.
That's a great analogy. It shows that failure is simply part of the game. It's about focusing on the long game, learning from each experience, and continually refining your approach.
And if you find yourself hitting roadblocks over and over again, maybe it's time to ask yourself some tough questions.
Are my expectations realistic? Am I truly committed? Do I have the right support system in place? Am I properly prepared? And maybe most importantly, am I truly willing to fail?
Because sometimes those setbacks are an indication that we need to adjust our approach, our timeline, or even our goals. It's about being honest with ourselves and making choices that are truly aligned with what we want to create.
It's like Sally Jesse Raphael. Before she became a household name, she went through years of financial struggles, firings, even homelessness. But she kept going. She learned from those experiences, and eventually she achieved incredible success.
Or think about Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. They got 33 rejections from publishers before they finally found a home for their book, Chicken Soup for the Soul.
And that book went on to sell over 30 million copies. Imagine if they had given up after the first 10 rejections, or even the 20th. It's a testament to the power of persistence and believing in your vision even when others don't.
Absolutely. Sometimes those rejections are just redirecting you towards a better path. And speaking of connecting with others, Keller also dedicates a whole chapter to the power of networking.
He defines networking as the development of relationships with people for mutual benefit. It's about recognizing that we can't achieve truly great things in isolation. We need to connect with others, support each other, collaborate.
And he shares his own story about how networking led to a whole series of positive outcomes for his business, including meeting the person who connected him with his book publisher. It's a great example of how networking is about more than just collecting business cards or trying to sell yourself. It's about building genuine relationships, offering support, being willing to help others.
He offers a ton of practical tips for making networking more effective. Be an active participant in groups and organizations, contribute to your network, be a good listener.
He also stresses the importance of serving others.
Instead of always thinking about what you can get, focus on how you can help the people in your network. Like his friend, Mark LeBlanc. Mark is always going above and beyond to help others, and as a result, he's built this incredible network of people who are always willing to support him in return. It's the principle of reciprocity at work.
It shows that when we give generously, we often receive in abundance. And Keller points out that it's often the simple things that make the biggest difference. Be a good listener, call people just to check in, take advantage of opportunities to meet new people. And don't forget those thank you notes. Those small gestures of gratitude can go a long way in strengthening those connections.
It's all about approaching networking with a spirit of generosity and a genuine desire to connect with others, recognizing that our success is often intertwined with the success of others.
So as we wrap up this part of our conversation, I'm curious, what are some of your key takeaways so far? What's resonating most with you?
There's so much to unpack here, but I think one of the biggest things for me is this idea that we have far more control over our lives than we often realize.
It's about taking responsibility for our thoughts, our words, our actions, our relationships, and recognizing that while we can't control everything that happens to us, we can control how we choose to respond.
And that choice, that attitude, can make all the difference. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day whirlwind of life and lose sight of the fact that we actually have a choice in how we experience it all.
Right. We let external circumstances dictate our mood. We get sucked into those negative thought spirals. It's like we forget we have any agency.
And that's why I think Keller's emphasis on cultivating a positive attitude as an ongoing practice is so important. It's not a one-time fix. It's about making those small, conscious choices each day that reinforce a more optimistic, empowered way of being.
It's like tending a garden. You can't just plant a seed and expect it to magically flourish. It needs constant care, right? You've got to weed out the negative thoughts, plant those seeds of positivity, and then nurture them with consistent effort.
I love that analogy. And just like a garden needs sunlight, water, and fertile soil to thrive, our attitude needs the right conditions too.
So what are some things we can do to create those optimal conditions for a positive attitude? There are so many great strategies we've talked about already. Where do we even begin?
Well, it's really about finding what works for you. Experiment with some of Keller's suggestions. Maybe it's reading those inspiring books, listening to a motivational podcast, practicing gratitude, using affirmations, consciously reframing those negative thoughts. Whatever resonates.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. The key is to find what feels authentic and sustainable for you, and then make it a consistent practice.
And be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
It's not about achieving some kind of mythical state of perpetual happiness where nothing ever goes wrong.
Right. That's not realistic. Life is messy. There are going to be challenges. It's more about equipping ourselves with the tools and the mindset to navigate those challenges with a little more grace and resilience.
It's about having the strength to keep going even when we stumble, to learn from our mistakes and to use those experiences to grow.
And what I love about Keller's message is that it's ultimately a message of hope and empowerment.
He says, changing my attitude changed my life. And if a better attitude can work miracles in my life, it can work miracles in yours.
It's a beautiful reminder that transformation is possible for each and every one of us. It starts with a decision, a commitment to embrace the power of a positive attitude.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into attitude is everything, what do you say? Ready to start creating some miracles in your own life?
What's one small step you can take today to shift your perspective, cultivate a more positive outlook, and begin moving towards the life you truly desire?
Remember, attitude is everything. And that's a wrap for today's deep dive. We hope you found these insights valuable and inspiring. Until next time, keep those windows sparkling clean and let the sun shine in.